the camera, it's my bedroom with like speakers and blankets. And so because my living room is on a street in New York City, so noise is always an issue. So my bedroom's in the back, and I just created this new little filming space, and I said, I got to get it ready by Friday for Trina and her team. So.
Oh, well, it totally worked. I love that you're in your bedroom. I love that you have blankets and speakers and all these things that we can't see, because all we see is truly like a Hollywood set. So we have so many women on today. So excited to hear from you, and lots of people who will be listening to the recording. I only open this up to the group of women who I personally work with on the team and those who are working in the book club right now. So we will eventually share this with lots of other people, but we're starting with this group. And ladies, this is how I'm going to do this today. I've got some questions for Petra. I just want to have a great conversation about her book. And about her journey in writing it, and what kinds of things have happened in the lives of women who've read it, including her own. Then I'm going to open it up to Q&A. And the easiest way for us to do Q&A, obviously, is for you to use the chat. This team is so used to using that written chat that we would love, when I do open it up to your takeaways and your questions, please do not be shy, because I know that you are not shy women. Please speak up and tell her what some of your favorite takeaways were. So with that, let me just start with an introduction. I had a chance to be a guest on Petra's podcast that everyone needs to subscribe to. You can find it on her website, petrakolber.com, the Perfection Detox. But I had a chance to be on her podcast. We recorded it the other day, and her introduction was so perfect, I almost wanted to steal it. So I'm going to do my own twist on her introduction. We have known of each other in the industry for many years. Petra is a legend in the industry. If you have not had a chance to Google her, and I know you know who she is, you've been reading her book, you're in the fitness industry, you're aware of Petra, but if you just Google her name and then just sit back for a moment and think, we have her as our guest on this interview today. She's done more than 60 fitness videos of her own. She has been the face of Reebok. She has presented all over the world, thousands of presentations to people everywhere. She is an author, a speaker, the host of her own podcast. She is in the fitness industry, the person that when she walks down the hallway, people kind of take a step back. Oh, here comes Petra. She's amazing. But you know what? When I had a chance to get to meet her in person last summer in San Diego, she was nothing more than 100% genuine and open and caring and anything but a fitness diva. She was down to earth and just the girl next door. So I had a chance to get to hear her speak at a women's conference at IDEA, and I was on the edge of my seat. I was physically leaning forward while she was speaking. And I was so glad that I had both my mom and my daughter at the conference with me to get to hear from Petra. So I will say that is when our friendship was born. And she gifted me her book and asked if I wanted to take a look at it. And I said, I'm not just going to take a look at your book. We're going to create a movement around your book. So that is my welcome to my friend Petra Kolber. Can we give her a round of applause?
Oh, heart. And Trina, I just want to say, a lot of people have said, I'd love to do this for a book club. No one has taken such beautiful care of this book as you and your team. And it's really humbling to see the commitment that you made to this. It's one thing to say, I'll do a book club. It's another one to actually show up in the way you guys have showed up. So for that, I am deeply, deeply grateful for you taking the time. I know you're all so busy anyway, and reading a chapter a day is a lot. And, tell a recovering perfectionist, you got to show up and do it daily. It's like, oh my God, I'm stressed. But thank you so much. And Trina, beyond anything I could have possibly have dreamed of. So thank you.
Oh, that is wonderful. So let's get to the beginning of where were you in this moment of time in your life that you decided that perfectionism had been such maybe a weight on your back that you not only wanted to be curious about it and study it, but you wanted to educate others about it? How did this start?
Yeah, so Trina, the brick wall moment is in the book. It was that moment when CBS called me. I pick up the phone And all of a sudden my heart's like, you know what, enough of turning things down for the fear of not being perfect. So that was kind of the awakening, that what I thought was connecting me to my audience and my potential was actually separating me. So that was the catalyst for recognizing, I don't think I can do this on my own. I'm going to start doing a deep dive through therapy and research and all of that. But then the reason I actually wrote the book, people for years have been saying, why don't you write a book? And I'm like, the thought of writing a diet book or a fitness book, I mean, I just can't think of one more way to do a squat or a burpee. And, you know, personally, I don't even like those things. So I think to write about them would be inauthentic. So what really happened, two things. I was doing a talk. I don't remember if this is in the book. I was doing like a lunchtime talk at a fitness event. And I kind of went off topic, which is unusual for perfectionists. Normally I'm like, da, 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 da. And I kind of mentioned this thing around having this anxiety for the need to be perfect. And I felt the audience lean in. And normally when I finish an event, you know, people are like, great, lovely, got the choreography, fantastic, on to the next presenter. And then we wrapped up the lunch and I turned around and there was a line of women down to the hallway going, you feel this way too? And they couldn't believe that Petra Kolber, fitness, whatever, felt this way. So that's when I was like, oh, there's a need here. And then like 2 years later, I did a TEDx talk. I knew I wanted to move into being a speaking, and I call it, you know, throwing your brick, you know, backpack over the wall with your cell phone. I was like, okay, I'm like a declaration, applied for TEDx, got TEDx. And I went, a little side story. They had said, you're up for the finalists. We can either do a meeting over Skype or we can do it in person. And being the part of perfection that I wanted to keep, I'm going to drive up to Rochester, to Syracuse, and I want to meet you in person. And they were like these young, you know, 18, 19-year-old, I'm probably the oldest, but I could be their grandmother at this point, never mind their mother. And I started talking about perfection. I felt them lean in. And that's where it started. So I did the TEDx talk, and I was getting all these messages offline, like, if it's my story, it's my daughter's story, do I help and I'm like, okay, if there's something I want to pursue and take the time to write, this will be the topic.
So every time you talked about your struggle with perfectionism and turning down opportunities because you were afraid of how you might be perceived by others, every time that happened, it led you to realizing that other people were so anxious to hear about it, and people were thirsting for help on how can I overcome what you are overcoming. So you really felt like a calling of people saying, Petra, I'm struggling too. Help me get through it.
Yeah. And this is, I think, something for your coaches and your team. But the thing is, they were never going to tell me that. This is the stuff that people don't tell us. But I talk about sharing our backstory. You know, there's that quote from the book by Stephen Furtick. The reason we all struggle with our insecurities is because we're comparing our backstory, our shadow side, to everyone else's highlight reel. So and it wasn't therapy. I had to know I had gotten through to the other side, but not so far ahead that I would forget what it felt like to be anxious, to have panic. But I needed to start the conversation, Trina. I couldn't wait for someone's not going to go to me in a fitness setting and go, love your workouts. Oh, and by the way, I feel extremely anxious about this need for feeling perfect in the industry. So I had to be that catalyst that almost gave them permission, which sounds so strange. I hope that doesn't come across the wrong way. But if Petra or someone that they respected was suffering, it made them feel less alone. And so I had to open the doorway, because again, this is the stuff that your clients, the people you work with, are not going to tell you. I'm such a busy mom, I feel like I'm failing. I can't keep up with whatever it is. So when you can share that, you know what, we all have different stories, but I've had those struggles too, or whatever your struggle is. I often say, when we can turn our pain into our passion without it being a therapy session, we become the best coach, friend, mother that we can be.
Oh my goodness. Do you love her energy? Do you love just her vibrancy for life? I love that you were willing to call yourself a catalyst, because you certainly have been. Your willingness to be brave and put your flaws, insecurities, struggles out to the world has given all of these other women in my life the same permission to not be afraid of just being who we are and not letting something that happened in the past define who we're going to be in the future. It seems like the most freeing kind of book that I've read. Would you agree that that's a word that you hear from people, that they feel lighter, freer, they feel more able to be themselves? Like you're giving us permission to be okay with the missteps.
Yeah, I think there's two things. A thing I'm hearing a lot that surprised me, Trina, was people said, I always expected joy to be there for everybody else, but I never expected it for me. And that surprised me. I was like, we're caregivers, you're coaches, you're leaders, you're team builders. So we're really good at wanting and expecting joy for others. But I kept hearing this over and over again. Now I've given myself permission to be joyful. So that was one thing. And then I think the other thing is people began to feel less alone. I think the big aha with this book is, oh, I'm not the only one. It's like, oh, no. We are so more alike in this. And Trina, what I do want to say, like, people go to me now, well, do you ever feel anxious? Do you ever, do you still suffer with this? OMG, totally. Like I said, my inner critic, she just shows up. You should have seen me an hour before this. There's parts of me, I was like, oh my God, my makeup. Oh my God, lighting. But there's pieces I want to try and show up to be my best self for you guys.
Right.
But not, look, if the audio works, great. And if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. And if the new camera works, fantastic. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out. And just say that when I had come on, the audio it gives me permission to try new things, a new backdrop. It sounds so small and silly.
It's not.
But it opens it up. But still, I have moments of nerves and anxiety. And I was speaking to a good friend of yours, Trina, yesterday, Todd Durkin. And I really feel that to be excellent in this world that we all want to be, we're going to feel nervous because we care. We're going to feel a little anxious because I read one of the people I'm really, some of the people, you had such a great interview, Trina, for the podcast, and I interviewed this other guy and he said, if you don't feel nervous, you're taking up too much space in this world. So it's like, okay, well, that's a very male way, but I liked it, it's like, if you're not ever nervous, you're in the center, you're not pushing, you're not stretching, which means you're not going to help others. But I laughed I was like, wow, how do I feel about that? Like, I like it. Yeah.
It's bold. It is bold, right? If you're not nervous, you're taking up too much space. You do give us permission in this book to be nervous. You give us permission in this book. One of the chapters that's been on my mind that we read in the past couple of days, I found that as I worked through the book, by the way, it got easier because it tackles some of the difficult issues of shame and fear paralyzing us at the beginning, which we can go to in a second. But then the past few days have been like sunshine and unicorns, and we're talking about flow, and we're talking about curiosity. And I found myself really excited in these past couple chapters, realizing that being curious in the world allows us to step out in the unknown and be more adventurous. And that's really where life is lived.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's so funny. My publisher really wanted to start with Perfection Detox, find joy, live bravely, tame your inner critic. Like, lead with the good stuff.
Oh, no.
I'm like,
no.
no. And this is where yes, exactly.
You won.
Because, and now we're into the whole positive the whole book's rooted in positive psychology, the science and the research. But until we get rid of, and not even rid, until we notice and we maybe move it to the side of the negative, that the stuff that's been stopping us. You can't find joy without doing the hard work. And that's where I think it can be a little dangerous in this society right now, where some of my favorite writers, favorite thought leaders that I follow, Brene Brown, for example, Elizabeth Gilbert, I love these women. I watch everything they do. And yet there's a little tendency to say, just let go of perfection. But it's not that easy. And in reading the latest research, the tricky thing about it is it shows up differently in every single one of us. Every single one of us on this call are going to have a different experience, a different relationship with perfection. So it takes a lot of unpacking, unlayering. And if you just say, let it go, it's just going to make us feel worse when I'm like, okay, here are my people I look up to saying, just let it go. And I wish it was that easy. But this is why the hard work leads you to the hard work. And it's just sticking with it long enough. That's why I try to make even the darker or the more challenging chapters not so heavy, you know, but it is heavy. Perfection is heavy. Like you say, it weighs you down.
Okay. So I think it's so brilliant. You just dropped some bombs. So let's just pause on this for a second. So the fact that you've heard other people take a topic as complicated and messy as perfectionism and simply say, oh, you just let it go, take a deep breath, exhale it out, right? Perfectionism isn't something that you can just simply exhale out. When you read your book, you realize how complicated it is, how many layers of the onion you're peeling back to see how deep of a topic it is. And I love that you have convinced me, and I know these women that I'm friends with here on the Zoom, in this book, that this is something to overcome it in any meaningful way. You have to understand it. And I feel like, gosh, thank you for doing all the yeoman's work of all the research, all the quotes, all the books you read, all the stories you collected to make us better understand that this is not something you exhale out. The only way to overcome it is to understand it. Can you talk about that a bit and all the research you had to do?
Yeah. So, because people ask me, you know, so for me, the research came in 3 different layers. One, I had gone back to school for positive psychology, and that gave me a different lens at looking at challenges, whether it's perfection, whether it's courage, whether it's anxiety, whatever. So in the past, Trina, when I had gone for help, which I did for 7 years, it was always from the lens of what's wrong versus what's going well. And then from that lens, let's look at what needs to be improved upon or mended so we can have a life of joy. So I had this new year-long working with Tal Ben-Shahar, who's one of the greatest thought leaders in the space of positive psychology, going, oh, well, that's an interesting lens. I've never really looked at my life that way before because of the negativity bias. We are conditioned to look at what's going wrong, give us the laundry list of how we could be better. So there was that. And then I needed to also look at the, you know, when you're doing a book on perfectionism, the first thing you have to do is look at the comp set. They call them comps. So what other book is out there around perfectionism? So, and most of them were like, so they were written by researchers. They were like by men. It was just, and it was good, but I was like, oh my God. And then I needed a PhD just to get through the research. I'm like, I'm feeling like, my worst inner critic was like, see, I told you weren't smart enough to write this book. So I'm like, what does that word? So it's just exhausting. But yet there's some really, I wanted it to be rooted in this, in the research. And even since I read their research, that's changing too, because it's so complicated. But I needed to get that. And then I also wanted to look at how did I want to package this in a way that was meaningful. So that involved stories. That had to be around stories. And so I wanted to have as many different stories as possible so the reader would hopefully relate to 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. And then I went and beta tested because I had been teaching this work. But then my one of my agent's wife said, I need you to go and beta test this. You need to go and make sure it works in person, online. So I spent another year testing out the methodology, seeing what made people feel great, seeing what worked. There was one step that I let go of because it actually made them feel worse. So
don't tell us. We don't want
No. So I'll put that in your brain and you'll be thinking about it. And then I got the stories. I followed up with them like, you know, a few months later. Some were instantaneous, like I'm already feeling. Some people were really stuck on that first step, you know, that hard one of noticing the noise. It got so stuck in that. And because it was a beta, like you guys have done it, you're reading a chapter a day. I was giving them information every day, the research. And so some of them were saying, we love this. I was just feeling like I wasn't keeping up perfectly. And like I say in the book, there's no perfect way to do this. Does that answer your
Yeah, no, I love hearing more of the backstory behind how it all came together. I love knowing that some of the other research out there was snoozing and written that maybe we couldn't relate to, because this, even just, let's just talk about the packaging. We're talking flower petals. We're talking a beautiful paintbrush. We're talking pretty colors and things that make us feel good.
Can I tell you about that cover, Trina?
Yeah, please do.
My publisher had been so, you hear as an author that sometimes you hand your proposal and your book over to the publisher and you get it back and it doesn't even look like yours. Yeah. Mine, we had such a great relationship. It was, they changed very little. It was a pretty clean manuscript when I handed it in, so I had this idea for a cover that thank God we didn't go with. But anyway, so I was writing the book, and I would go to this space called the writer's room because I would never get it done in my house. It's like sparkly internet. So I went to this place where very, they were writing plays. It was some of the best writers in New York. And I get this email come in. It says, "Oh, we've got the cover of your book." And my heart sank. I felt like nauseous. I was like, we haven't even talked about the cover. I'm like, oh my God. So I opened it up and it was that cover. And I was like, oh my God. It was
I understood you.
Hallelujah. They got me. And I sent it right to my publisher. He went, and to my agent, he goes, "They did this? Did they talk to you about this?" I went, "No." He went, "You hit pay dirt." Because most of the covers in bookstores now, they were at the time, they were all blue, orange, and white. All the same. It's like blue, orange, and white, blue, orange, and white. And if you go into a bookstore now, I'll send you, they're pretty much very thematic. I just got, and the petals going around the back. Yeah. Thank you. I had nothing to do with that. I got so lucky.
You did, because clearly your vision for the book and wanting it to be something that women would want to, and I don't mean just women, but that's just who we're working with, would want to grab onto and take as I feel like this is more of a journal than a scientific study, even though it's so rooted in science. As you said, it feels more like a personal journal to me, because you're giving us permission to really look at ourselves intimately, and it seems more of an intimate book.
Can I share one other thing? This is the backstory of what
you can share whatever you want.
Okay, and my ego. So, the thing when you first have your first book, number one, it's great if you get traditional publishing, which I got, have an amazing agent. Number two, you get, it's like street cred to say you have a hard cover. Like, people normally have a hard cover first, and then it moves into soft cover. So then I spoke to my publisher and said, "Oh, so this is going to be hardcover?" And she went, "No." And I was like, And this, and my ego was like, "I want a hardcover. Oh, see, you're not as good as you thought you were. You're getting the soft cover." But this is why. She said two things. Like you, we want it to feel like a journal. Yes. And we believe women are going to buy one for themselves and four for their friends. And they're going to put it in their handbag. And with a hardcover, that's not going to happen. And so I went, okay. And then also, to be honest, because you're a first-time author, if your hardcover doesn't sell, it may never even go to soft cover, which means you're on the shelf for 6 months. It doesn't work. You're off. So it was protective from their standpoint, because I wasn't a proven author at that point. And then I did get the point. I have so many hardcover books. They never go in my handbag. But I have soft ones that I'll take with me. But I have to tell you, my ego got a big, I want the hardcover. But it was the best. They know, publishers know a thing or two. So I love
the stories behind the story. All I did was say, I love the cover. It makes me feel like a journal. And you're like, well, let me tell you about that. But I can't imagine how much you had to work through in order to, one, put yourself out there so vulnerably in the industry where, in the fitness industry, it can feel like a unique pressure to be perfect. You're supposed to look a certain way and be a certain way and be a certain size. And, you move through a lot of that in the book. This group really loved chapter 17 on the reasons why we move and the reasons why we exercise, by the way, that really spoke to this team. But I love that you were willing to put yourself out there and that you're willing to make it so palpable for us to learn the lessons and do some simple but profound exercises to work through them. It's really a gift that you put together. This manual isn't a manual. It's more like a college course that everybody should take.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You said something else earlier I wanted to pick up on as well. You mentioned earlier that perfectionism doesn't look the same on any two of us. I see Stacy nodding. I see Kathy nodding. That is one of the things that struck me the most is that I told you, and I wrote it to my team at the beginning of this, that I was like, I don't really think I'm a perfectionist. I mean, I'm going to read her book because I like her and I'm willing to support her, but I'm really a perfectionist. And then I started reading. I was like, wait, that's perfectionism? Oh, wait, hold on. That's a shade of perfectionism? And then I realized that it's in all of us. It just shows up differently. And I think that was super eye-opening to me, to be willing to say, oh, that's what prevents me from wanting to set that goal. Oh, that's what prevents me from wanting to do this. It's these shades of perfectionism in all of us. Have you heard that from a lot of people, that people who, there's women on the Zoom right now who I guarantee you, if I asked, the title alone, did this jump out at you? About half the women would be like, I knew it was for me, right? They self-identified already as a perfectionist, and they were like, this was like water to them. They were so ready for it. Then I'd say the other half of us, read the book because I'm a friend of yours. I wanted to support you. And they were willing to read something that I sent them in the mail for Christmas. And I think the other half of us were so pleasantly surprised that we all could benefit from something that we didn't even realize was an issue in our lives. Does that sound?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I bought, so many women have said, I bought this for a friend. And then I'm like, oh my God, I saw myself in that book. Maybe not in every chapter, but there were pieces of it that helped me, whether they see it there. I call it their confidence gap between where they are and where they want to be. And again, it's so tricky, and it's not good or bad unless it's absolutely paralyzing. And there are cases where it's paralyzing, and then that's therapy, and then it's finding the right therapists, because even the therapists are saying it's really hard to unpack, because, and I did this, I think I wanted to be the perfect patient. I wanted to be so I think for many, seriously, this is how messed up it is. I wanted to be perfect. I mean, I wouldn't talk about some of the things that I probably needed to talk about because it just felt uncomfortable. So it's so complicated, like you said. But yeah, I've had many women. And so I often say to people, if it's not for you, think about it for your daughter, or think about it for a friend. And because if we can be there as a change maker or a conversation starter around some of the things that maybe resonated with us, you're then giving other permission, the people that you might be closest to.
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about this. And again, it's not therapy, but we can't live our best lives. And so I guess, Trina, for many, what I would say, but whether it's perfection or not, I would say more women maybe could relate with the idea that, could you honestly say that you are your own best friend? Because I ask that question to women, and then more hands will go. If I say, okay, keep your hand up if you can honestly say you are your own best friend, and I used to say, and you love yourself. I even changed that. I said, and you like yourself. Most hands will go down. And that is perfection it just, because we have put so many expectations on ourselves, we don't even realize that it is a trait of perfectionism.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could just listen to you all day. I'm taking notes. I'm like, oh wait, I'm supposed to be engaging.
You're recording this, so it's good. Yes, and you got it. No, but you're such a great interviewer. Did you notice? Has everyone noticed how great Trina is as an interviewer? Yeah, that's some good coaching skills there.
Oh, I really appreciate that. You know why? It is the chapter that you talked about being willing to live in the moment. And I have many things I need to improve on in life, but one thing I really do enjoy doing that I loved reading about in your book is one of the quotes you actually used was, in order to have a better future, you can only have a better future if you do the hard work of living in the present.
In the present, yeah. And it is interesting because Todd Durkin and I spoke about this yesterday. All of us here, we have visions. We have those big, hairy, audacious goals. So it's like, so we're constantly in this forward motion. And we're in a world right now where our focus and attention is a million different directions. It's never been harder to be more present. And yet every book you read that's talking about success is, I think, one of the commodities of the future is going to be your ability to focus. And that's something I've worked on this year, to be honest. And it is, again, it's that trickle down effect. So to be present doesn't mean you're not incredibly driven, you're not incredibly ambitious. But if we're always in the future, we're never able to take care of the opportunities that happen right in that moment. Because we're missing the opportunity of now for the opportunity of what may be in the future. And so the only way we can play off, there's so much, like the only constant is change, but the only way we can do our part in, I don't want to say the word predicting the future because that's an impossibility, but maybe not going 50 degrees off course, maybe going like 10 degrees off course and then kind of veering back, is by being in this moment. And it's, again, like I say, happiness is not steady state, it's intervals. It's going to be like that with our attention and our ability to be in the present. But if we can just check in once an hour, like, where am I? Be here now. Before you send a text, before you sit down for a Zoom call, before you meet with your coaches, your team, where am I? And just wherever you are, be all there. And then you'll find you'll get so much more done by being in the moment. I think people, there's this constant push and pull, Trina, like, well, if I give up perfection, I'm not going to be successful. If I don't think about the future, they actually say worry about the future, I'm going to miss all the mistakes that could happen. But that's all coulda, woulda, maybe, did. But what we know for sure is this moment and this moment. And those little moments build to our days, build to our months, create the years, and build to our future. But again, in a world that, listen, I think this for me, honestly, Trina, is the most challenging thing because there's always something I could be doing. Always. We're all busy. There's always something I could be doing better, differently. I got 5 things to choose from, but now I'm like, and the thing that's really helped me this year is I've stopped negotiating with myself. I don't negotiate. Should I do this or should I do that? I make a decision. Maybe there's 5 things I need to do. I plan. I know you're a big planner, Trina. I still can't plan the night before, but I plan in the morning. 5 things I have to do. I pick one, maybe not the one that should be picked, and then I do it. Versus going, should I do this one? Maybe I should be doing this one. And I lose so much time negotiating with myself. I have gained hours back in my day. I no longer negotiate with myself. I don't negotiate with my diet. I don't negotiate with my alarm clock. I don't negotiate with my choices. And even if it's the wrong choice, I make it. And then I can say, okay, that was the wrong choice. Next thing.
First of all, the chat, which I will open up in a second, the chat is blowing up right now. This is the women. They're quoting from your book. They're commenting on what you're saying and putting it into their own lives. I want you to see this. I'll share the transcript with you afterwards so you can see what people are. But I love that this is the part of the book. This is like after we get through kind of the dirt at the beginning, then it was, by the way, when you said earlier that women would say to you, oh, I'm not a perfectionist. And you say, oh, well, then read it for your daughter or your sister. I feel like my answer for you now is, oh, there's shades of perfectionism in all of us. Okay. Everyone needs this book. That is what I found with one paragraph into the book. I was like, oh yes, this is something I need to tackle. And I think all of us in this group realized that different chapters spoke to us, but this book spoke to all of us. And so just having women own that and say, oh, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that there are shades of perfectionism in all of us. And this is going to help you work through them. Okay. That's just my plug that everyone needs your book.
I'm taking that. Okay.
So then your ability to carry us through this book and get to a point where we feel in control, where we feel, where you said the opportunity is now and your future will be better created when you are in the present. I loved getting to this part of flow. It just made me
You're in flow today, right? Is that where you are today? Yeah.
Flow is yesterday or today, ladies. I can't remember. I think it's today. But the whole concept of getting us to this point where we don't feel as wound up or as stressed about every decision that, and what you just said right there, like you wake up, you make a decision, you own it, you go. There's no more second.
And it's taken me 55 years to get there. It's like, oh my God. And you know what? It's like, wow, why didn't I do this last year or the year before? Because last to say this, so right now we're on February 1st. Was it February 1st? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember my January last year was a doozy. I mean, it was just a disaster. And I think I was like writing a book and I don't know, everything was just off track. And then like I'm a month in, and I'm not saying I am saying this is going to be the rest of the year, but it's taken me a long time to figure out what works for me without judging it. You know, like I read all these, how's everybody else getting up at 5 a.m., 5, you know, whatever. It just has to work for you. And it's taken me a long time to figure out there is no perfect way. And
Petra, I have to tell you this. I was at a conference in Canada 3 years ago, and the presenter, who I admire, adore, and respect, says, if you are not up at 5 a.m., you are not a high performer. And I was like, oh, what's wrong with me?
I know, right?
I want to get up that early. Is that really the standard? And then I'm like, you're a dude. You don't even know. Like, so it's funny how we can take literal input or advice from people we admire or look up to. And then I love how you just said, wait, what works for me? In this group the other day, people were commenting on workouts that we're supposed to get behind and we're supposed to help advocate or promote. And a couple of the women in this group were like, I'm hating this workout. Do I need to love it? And I was like, no, based on Petra's book, do you?
And yeah, I think this is what's dangerous, and it's really good. It's a really good learning lesson for us all as coaches and leaders. You might say something so offhand that you've forgotten it before you even have finished the sentence. But someone you're working with might take that as gospel because you are in a leadership role. And I think there's a lot of people, and look, it works for a lot of people. But if we say it's black or white, and a lot of male thought leaders do, not mentioning any names, it's my way or the highway. I see this like butting heads. It's like, and I like to say, this is an invitation for what works for me, and maybe pieces of it will work for you. Versus like you got to be up at 5 a.m. Someone said the other day, if you get up at 4:15, when the hell did 5 a.m. is not enough? It's now the 4 a.m. miracle. I'm like, geez, I'm doomed. But when I make sure what works for me, and I notice my negative habits that I can but it's a process. So, and again, we're in a bumper sticker world, crush your fears, get up at 5, dominate your mornings. I'm already exhausted. It's 5:05 a.m. I'm freaking exhausted. And I haven't done anything I need to do. And I feel like a failure. And I bought all the books too. You should see how many books have told me I'm a disaster. I'm like, bite me.
Oh my gosh, if you didn't love Petra already, how fun to get the behind the scenes of her life. It's
a hot mess up here, let me tell you.
It is
we have a good time.
It is so fun. I keep thinking like, I need to catch a flight to New York. I want to take her out for a glass of wine. I want to debrief even more about how she created all this. It's amazing. Okay, one thing I want to share, and then I'm going to open it up to the chat, because I see the chat has been blowing up. When you were talking about the difference in the way men write books, my friend Nikki quoted mansplaining. And then it goes on from there. Lots of stickers. But here's what I noticed as someone who was hosting a book club. First of all, I love that so many women were willing to get behind it just based on trust. And that reminds me, we have the ability to influence other people in good ways when we build trust. So I sent this book out, invited people to join in a book club, and they responded. But what's been really interesting to me is to read all the comments, as I know you have as well, read through some of the self-reflection and how willing these women have been to put themselves out on display. And I see Rachel on, and I was thinking about a comment she made the other day. She said that she read a chapter of the book. She went to the bathroom. She's like, TMI, so sorry about that. But I read a chapter of the book. I went to the bathroom, which is a gift with 2 little kids to have 5 minutes to go to the bathroom, right? And she said, I stood there and looked in the mirror. And I looked at myself in the mirror and said, this holds me back. Perfectionism is holding me back. The fear of the unknown, the fear of not being socially accepted, the fear of being judged holds me back. And she said, no more. And it was just amazing envisioning Rachel in that moment, like a book from your chapter that could positively influence an amazing woman and friend in my life who was a wife and a mom of two and a coach and a friend and a sister and a daughter. And I think of the ripple effect that your book has on all these other women. And I see across the top of my screen, Stacy and Alexa and Kathy and Libby and Rachel. And I can think of comments that they've all written that's helped me understand them more, but more importantly, helped them understand them more. How do you feel about that this ripple effect of a chapter in a book, a quote? Nikki has been amazing in this book club, by the way, to give her a shout out, of pulling out different quotes. Jen Cadzillo pulling out different quotes and sharing them with us. Alexa. And I think, do you understand the ripple effect of one book that looks like a beautiful journal and what that could do to households and relationships?
Thank you. It's weird. Again, the backstory. So thank you. Yes, I'm like, this to me is my life's work. If I was, I still have to pay the New York rent, which is ridiculous. But if I could do this work for free, I would. I can't yet because the backstory is I always say this is the year of having my income match my reputation because my reputation's amazing. My income, it's not the same, but if I could do this work for free, absolutely. And it's interesting, Trina, because when a book comes out, the first question for the first few months is, how's the book doing? And what they really mean is, did it make the bestseller list? And I didn't play the game. It came out, did super well, but I'm seeing this book now as the long game. And this year, your book club, Trina, and then I'm getting other people saying, oh, we saw this book, and then I'm getting it from my friend in Australia, and then I bought that. I'm beginning to feel like there's almost like a grassroots movement around the book, which makes my heart explode. And that to me is real success. Well, thank you. This to me is success. I don't care what it is if it's on the bestseller list. I mean, the publishers care. Our worth from the outside world. You didn't make the bestseller list, and I see games. I could drop my book. Well, I couldn't because my publisher wouldn't allow it. But people drop their book to 99 cents, so everyone goes and buys it, and suddenly becomes number one on Amazon.
Yeah,
is that what we value? So this, to me, having this conversation with these amazing women on your team.
I love that you don't play the game, Petra. I love that you're not playing the game. I got a book in the mail, and I'm not naming names. It's fine. I got a book in the mail for free from someone, and who I had opted into his list once, and saw him speak once, and didn't resonate with me. So I got a book in the mail for free. I'm like, why am I getting this book in the mail? And then I look, and I'm like, oh, this just went on the bestseller list. So you just send the book out for free or for a 99-cent download, and that is ego enough for you to get your book on the bestseller list. By the way, I don't even know what's on the bestseller list. I just look at I don't know who's looking at that. Maybe your publisher, maybe. But I want you to know that your worth is far beyond a list. Your worth is literally lives. Right?
That's a good quote. Your worth is...
There we go.
It's lives. Oh, that's a t-shirt there.
Okay, I'm going to write that down really quick.
Don't measure yourself by lists. I got to come back to that. I got a noodle on that one, but but talking about that, like you was mentioning Rachel, I mean, someone said, why, this is before the book got published. And I was sitting down with this guy, and he was like, I was trying to figure out which way to go. Do I go like this happiness thing, which I love, but also this perfection thing? And he goes, well, don't you think perfection is, what was the word he used? Precious, a little precious. I went, exactly. I went, what? He goes, well, isn't that like almost like, I'm like, do you know the suffering and how it holds people back? And so someone said to me the other day, well, what do you hope? We were talking about how our brain runs ragged. And I say, I was joking about, I'm kind of not joking. Wouldn't it be awful if on my tombstone was, if we had to put like what the last thought was that we had.
Yeah.
Her last thought was she cared about what other people thought of her or something like that, or her last thought was, how much did I weigh? I mean, it's just like, but if we really like fast forward to the end of our life, what is that tombstone going to say that we carry in our heart? And it's not easy work. And you're going to have moments where you feel like I'm in my flow, I'm full of joyful. And then someone will say something, or you'll catch an image, and you'll be like, oh. But then the great news is now you catch yourself catching yourself. You go, okay, that's interesting. Wonder why that triggered, and you move on. And so it doesn't, I just think the world that we live in right now makes it very challenging to say, I'm on the other side, never going to have to deal with this again. And because, Trina, the more you overcome your perfection, the more courageous you become. And then the more courageous you become, the more you stretch yourself. And the more you stretch yourself, the stakes get higher. And then when the stakes get higher, guess who comes back? Your inner critic, because the game just changed. And so now you're also on this new white powder again, because Trina or Petra, we haven't done this thing before. So in a way, it's kind of like very cool that those moments of anxiety, and then notice, he's like, this means I've just stretched myself again. I've stepped into the white powder. So I think if it never comes back, we also maybe need to be concerned, because it means we've become so comfortable. So we're not looking for this, but if it comes back, we can now look at it from a different lens of what it's trying to show us.
And even reading through the book, I look back at different pivotal moments and I guess pivotal moments, like ones that were negative experiences, especially in the industry or as a presenter or coach. I look back at those now and think, why did that bother me so much? Oh, because I care too much about what other people think, and I hold on to that and think that their words define me. And a couple experiences that I had just in the past 2 years, I was at a talk in DC, and a gentleman came up to me, and I was just about to lead like a 2-hour workshop. And so I was, all in good energy and excited and feeling good and pumped up. And this guy walks up to me, he goes, "Oh, good to see you again. Looks like you've lost weight since the last time I saw you." And I go, like my jaw just dropped. He goes, "Yeah, you've really leaned out, Trina." And I'm like, boom. I mean, it was soul crushing. Because then all you think about is, what did I look like before? And where did you see me that I was such a moose? And it was so terrible. And it was so crushing. And why do I keep thinking of this guy? Like that he had the power to like pull the rug out, beneath me like that. Anyway, I'm sure you had moments in time where you've had someone comment on something, they suck all your energy away. And then you think, okay, I cared too much about what this one person thought of me, and that I gave it too much weight.
Yeah. And it's human nature. I've had people come up to me before my session and drop a nugget like that or about something else. I'm like, oh my, it happened a couple of years ago, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a really negative comment from a female. And I was like, why would you even say that before a session? But and again, it's so interesting in our industry that we feel like it's okay to talk about our weight or how someone looks like, again, that's like definition of success. Like, okay, did you even hear what I was talking about? Or you just busy about what I was looking like? It's like,
Yeah, you just start to kind of question like your value and what the content was so much more interesting than the clothes I had on. Why did that bother you? Someone in an evaluation one time wrote that I didn't dress as a presenter. I had on like jeans and heels and whatever, and she didn't think that I had dressed as a presenter. And I was like, did you hear what I said? Did anything I say matter? You were so busy judging that it didn't matter anyway. But that is on me, because why have I held on to those things? I'm reading in your book.
I have some from like 1999 I can tell you about. I know the date, the convention, what session, and I've let it go. But I could tell you if I thought about it.
I love that you're giving us permission to, and when I say let that go, you've made us do the deeper work of understanding the meaning it had in our life and where it may have come from. And I started to, in one of those chapters, look back on the words and the voices in your head really spoke to me. And like, where did some of those thoughts come from? If they were not my own, where did some of those early criticisms come from, and why have they stayed rooted? And it helped, kind of unroot some of those things and realize those people don't matter in my life, or their words aren't important in my life.
And now you said that too, actually, Trina, I just thought about this. Think about the words that our industry, the fitness industry, puts out there around us, without us, if it's not directed at us. There's a lot of negative, around body image, looking a certain way, to be a fitness expert, So even if it's not directed at us, it's close enough to the industry that we care about that it's hard not to get sucked into that. And I think we're wising up. I do. But we're still got a long way to go. But I do think we're beginning to wake up to the idea that this is not the definition of success. This is a vehicle to take
I
it.
love that she just pointed to her bicep. I did a post
Well,
recently about I'm not defined by my bicep. Thank God I'm not defined by my bicep. It would be pretty sad. But this, the group that you're talking to and the women you're talking to, I think one thing I could say about us is that having worked with women like this for the past 10 years in this realm, is that we have become so much wiser to strength being internal and external. And so much of what we coach on is not just what we're eating or how we're moving, but how we're thinking. And that's why your book really fits my tribe and will ripple out from here, because we're so focused on being strong on the inside as well as strong on the outside. So books like this just fit our, fit who we're about and what we're about. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing that with us.
Oh, I mean, thank you for trusting me, Trina, with your team, and thank you guys that may have known who I was or have who's this Petra Kolber, or because it's like that's what I was called for the first 5 years of my career, and we had Petra Kolber. I'm like, I'll take it, whatever. But thank you for trusting me.
Oh, yeah. Let me read some of the comments that are here. So, ladies, you've been doing such a great job in the chat. If you have an actual question you want to ask, please let me know. But here are the things that people are saying. Nikki is joking when you're talking about the tombstone. She says, a size 2 for life on my tombstone, that means nothing. Things that are more important than that.
But you know what? If we walk past that tombstone secret, we go, oh, good for her. She's the discipline. I feel like,
but I skipped over size 2 somewhere around like 10 years old. I don't know. I never got there. Let's see. People are saying, what kinds of questions would you have? Let's see. Well, Ashley has a more specific question on the book. So let me, ladies, if you have a question, throw them in the chat right now. Ashley's wondering, could you give us just a quick overview of the process for how you started the manuscript? Did you start with an outline of those 21 steps? Did you write out your big rocks first, or did you collect all the stories? How did you do it? I'm guessing she might be asking personally.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I started with the steps. I knew the 3 phases. I knew I had to kind of detox first. Like that to me was, the awareness part. I knew then I wanted to go into like the acceptance and then the action. So I knew it was going to be more like clearing out, putting in the good stuff, and then sustainability. So I knew I wanted it to be 21 steps. We kind of thought, is it going to be 28 steps? Is it 21 steps? Is it 7 steps? So we kind of got how many steps it was. I outlined the idea around each step. We hadn't really dialed down on the actual title at that point.
Yeah.
Then I put down what research would fit under there. And this didn't happen all in a very linear process, but I got as much research from the books as possible from each chapter. Then I looked at my own story, where that would fit in to each chapter. And then I kind of beta tested it pretty early on to see if the sequence made sense to the women I was working with, and then get the stories out from there. And then I did several live workshops along the way. And over the course of a year, at conventions too, that weren't really specific to the book, but it was around perfectionism, that I could see what people leaned into. And then a big part of it too was seeing what was out there in the market, and what would my point of differentiation be. And what a big thing publishers want to know is, where's your credibility? So a lot of my credibility had been built in the fitness industry. So I wanted to bring that's why we went through like the whole detox things that kind of fit in with my history, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question. If you have more questions about that after, I'm happy to, a question about writing a book, happy to help you out however I can.
Well, that was super clear that you had the vision of the 3 units, and then the steps, and then you collected your own story across those, and you collected other stories, and you plugged in the research. Like that sounded, I'm sure it didn't go perfectly
Yeah. And something that helps, you can write cue cards. My friends have written cue cards, and they kind of move the cards around. So you've got like little index cards, like this goes, and then so you can it's like a working, I needed to see the whole thing, and then move the pieces around. So that, like, if you put like each chapter, just the name of it and the idea, or maybe 5 lessons that you get from that, if it's a self-help book or whatever, put your stuff on cue cards. You can kind of move it around like index cards, kind of like how I map out my talks too, my keynotes. I move things around and then kind of go into the deep work.
Oh my gosh, thank you for being willing to share that. the process you went through to create this. Some of the other comments above, and then there's one more question, but let me just share with you some of the comments. You said that, oh gosh, future casting was the part that used to paralyze me, Carrie wrote. Future casting was the part that used to paralyze me. People said, self-negotiating is exhausting.
And we do it without even realizing. We do this little like backwards and forwards. Oh my God, it took me years to really recognize what I was doing. And then here's the worst thing. We negotiate, so we make a deal with ourselves and then we'll break it. And then we feel like, just like, it brings such a sense of shame, really, because like, oh my God, how can I can't even show up for myself? But we're not alone with it, because half of these negotiations we're making are so unrealistic. I'm going to get up at 5, I'm going to take the kids, but it's like, I'm going to do the best I can, and you make certain milestones that are non-negotiable, and it just frees up so much space to do the stuff that you can have influence and impact over.
I love how you can take a sentence and just free flow from it and say, I can say self-negotiating. One woman wrote, paralyzes me. Someone else said is exhausting. And you just immediately were like, yeah, recognizing that that's what you're doing and recognizing that some of those expectations you're placing on yourself are so unrealistic. And then when you let yourself down, you feel shame. Those are just beautiful lessons for this group to take from here. Let's see. Let me just see if there's any other question at the end. Let me read this. Sarah just said, all the time, I self-negotiate. I let myself down. It's just a cycle. Sarah, thank you for sharing that. Jane says, as a mom of 3 daughters who are dancers, 17, 16, and 11, how do I help them with perfectionism in the comparison game? Your book has helped me. It's so difficult. You were a dancer, so I know you get this. How do I help my daughters with perfectionism and comparison?
Yeah, it's so hard because that's what the world is built upon. So I think it's also showing up as a mom. Your daughters are going to really watch you, your words, how you show up in the world. That's the greatest teacher they'll ever have. And then also maybe find some role models. I'm not sure what kind of dance they do, whether it's ballet, so it's Misty Copeland, right? So she's not the traditional model. Or if it's jazz or Broadway. Find a couple of their role models, and if you can do the research of the struggles that they had or the failures that they had before they became, someone they looked up to. I say this to a lot of moms. Find a role model that your kids like, because they won't listen to you, but they'll say, okay, if so-and-so had these failures, can you find a dancer, whatever road that they're in, that's had struggles, that didn't fit in and still made it? And that will just give them another place to look at inspiration.
Great answers, Petra. So Jane, she said, you are your own best teacher. Be a great role model, which we know you are. Watch the words you are using around your girls, which we know you do. And then look for inspiration from others who may have gone rogue, done their own way, overcome adversity, and still been successful. Great advice. Rachel says, have been paralyzed for a handful of years in this coaching business. Let me clarify. Rachel's a very successful coach. So it's interesting, this is coming from a place of someone who has achieved great success. Having been paralyzed for a handful of years in this coaching business now, lots of cobwebs and uncertainty in my head. I couldn't seem to see through them. Reading this book has allowed me to pinpoint the type of mindset I've been living, and it's been a huge wake-up call to what I need to practice and work on. Awareness and action will propel me forward to live a year I can be proud of. So thank you, Petra. We'll be living and practicing the passionist mindset from here on out.
I think that's amazing. I think any of us that are coaches or leaders, a big thing that happened for me is that I felt like I needed to know it all and to be a great coach. And we don't. You just need to know a little bit more than the people that you are leading. And, that's how we stay great coaches. You stay with Trina, you get the updates, you get the research, you get, great inspirational techniques and motivational strategies, but we don't have to know it all. We don't have to know the answers. We don't need to have been coaching for decades. Because I think sometimes if you're that far removed from the people you're helping, if you're that far ahead, you can't relate to them. So it's knowing the answers. They definitely need you to be the leader, but it's kind of sometimes a real gift if you're not that far ahead, because you get to remember the struggles that the people you're working with are having.
That's so smart and maybe a beautiful way to end this, that we are not expected to be perfect. We're not expected to know it all. We're expected to show up and try and to have some inspiration to share with the people that we're serving, right? Like a bit of inspiration to put into other people's hands and hearts and let them do with it what they will. They don't even need to be all of our own original ideas, right? So much of what I do as a coach is pass along what I've heard and how I processed it and simply share that.
There's a great talk, Trina, called The Remix. It's a TED Talk. I'll send you the link that you can share with your group, because I think that's another thing that stops us. We think that everything we have to say has to be original, our own idea. I have borrowed and begged, but then it becomes yours by your language. And it's a great talk. It's all about how some of the best music were remixes and borrowing from this, and nothing is original. Everything old is new again. We borrow from each other. If it's something major, then you give credit to that person, obviously, but it becomes yours by the uniqueness of your voice upon that research or whatever it is.
Oh, I love that phrase you just said, the uniqueness of your voice upon that research. Is she just so fun to listen to? You're so articulate, and uniqueness of your voice on that research. I did notice how often in the book you had brilliant quotes from other people that you had no issue with sharing, but then you would unpack that quote for us and talk about how you heard that or how you applied that. So back to Rachel's point and what we said earlier is that we're not expected to know it all. Look for inspiration in daily life from podcasts and books and living life and observing your life, and simply share that with the people who've trusted you to lead. Petra, I can't thank you enough. I am honored that you spent your morning with us. Thank you for getting your set ready for us. It turned out beautifully.
Can I do one thing before I go? I always do.
You're with a bunch of coaches, and
it's called Wishes, and then I have to go. I've got a podcast in here. So I take one of these cards, and I'll break it open, and whatever this card says, it's meant for you guys.
Oh.
Okay, so it says, open your arms as wide as you can to receive. Oh, this is a good one. Let's do it again. Okay. Open your arms as wide as you can to receive all the miracles with your name on them.
Open your arms as wide as you can to receive all the miracles with your name on them. I'm a lockbox. Telling you, ladies, grab your cameras if you want to be able to take a picture or do that. Petra, this is what I want to end you with. How can we hang up from this and best serve your mission? Is it tagging your Instagram? Is it telling everybody about this book? Is it how can we best serve your mission? Aside from us carrying out your practices, which I promise we're going to, how can we further your cause?
I think just, if you like the book, share it. If you could, I guess, honestly, if you could write a review on Amazon.
Yeah, tell us. We will do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you go to Amazon, if you could write a review, even just click the 5 stars or whatever, or 4 or 3, but no 2s or 1s. Kill me. If you could go to Amazon and leave a review, that would be super, super helpful. It goes such a long way. Just a little sentence of what you liked. And if you could share the book, that would be amazing. And all your posts have been just so wonderful. So thank you.
All right, everyone, ladies, will you, as a gift for her time this morning and sharing her book, will you please join me and go doing a review on Amazon? Please tag her on Instagram and Facebook if you're going to talk about the book or write about it. I have already shared Petra's name and the book and her website with the Powers That Be at Beachbody to ask her to be a keynote speaker at one of our conferences, and I'm going to bat for that. So I'm hoping to make that happen for her in the next year.
Tell Carl I was at a meeting. He almost brought me in for his walking program, and then he let me go when Shaun T did hip hop abs. He owes me. I lost millions because of Shaun T. Millions.
You are in a better place. I will say that, though. I will happily pass that along. You have gone on to do amazing things. Thank you, Shaun T. So thank you for being here with us, Petra. Thank you, everybody, for being on. I'm going to take it off speaker view. So if you want to get to take a picture of everybody, and then you can go tag her and post her. And I know she's got to move on to her day.
Podcast.
Are you filming today?
Yes, I'm recording 3 interviews today.
Oh my goodness, that is, I'm so honored that I was one of them. I can't believe it. Okay, one more. Yay! Bye, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Petra, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the gift of your time, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye, Trina.